Hi everyone. So if you guys have been watching for a while, you know last year I did a whole bunch of stuff around the fire pit. But one thing I never got around to were tables. So today we're going to fix that. These are nice, very easy to build, super strong, yet durable outdoor tables. I mean, you could also use them indoor if you wanted to. I just built mine for outdoors. They got a concrete top and a wood base, and I made mine to match the bench that I refinished last year. So let's give her. Well, you gotta start somewhere, and the first place I'm gonna start is to make my molds for my concrete slabs. Because the slabs are gonna take a couple days to dry, I'm gonna get this out of the way so I can work on the wood frames while the slabs are drying. Now, I'm making my molds out of 3/4 inch melamine that I've had left over from other projects, and I'm gonna make my slab a full 1.5 inches thick, so my melamine sides are gonna be 2¼ inches tall. You're going to want to make sure you pre-drill all of your holes for this, and then I'm just using some 1.5 inch long drywall screws. They're very thin screws, so they're less likely to bulge and crack the melamine, but they're very coarse threads, so they hold on to that chipboard inside of them really well. You're going to want to add a screw about every 6 inches or so, and because my slabs are 15¼ inches around, 3 screws is plenty for me. Once the mold's fully assembled, go ahead and give it just a quick pre-clean. I'm just using an all-purpose cleaner on a shop rag. But after the mold is cleaned, now we need to wax it. This is going to act as a mold release agent, so the mold will separate really simply from the concrete. I'm just using an inexpensive car wax for this, but it works amazing. To waterproof the mold, go ahead and add a 100% pure silicone. The color doesn't matter, but you need a pure silicone, just like a kitchen and bath, around all of the corners and up all of the sides. Then just go back with your finger or a round over tool and just smooth out all of the caulking and let it dry for at least a couple hours before you add concrete to the mold. Now, speaking of concrete, we can go ahead and start mixing ours right now. Now, I, by some sheer fluke, managed to need exactly 1 bag for both of my slabs, and I swear I didn't plan that, but I'm just using the most inexpensive bag you can find at any hardware store, and I also got some charcoal dye while I was there. It's in the concrete aisle. Make sure you're wearing gloves and mask for this because the dust is not good for your lungs. So add your water incrementally, and you're going to want to mix this up to about an oatmeal-like consistency. Before we add the concrete to our molds, make sure they're good and level in every direction. I'm just using a high-tech stick that I found on the ground to level off my mold. But literally anything will work because the concrete will flow to the lowest spot a lot faster than you think it will. I filled the mold about 3/4 full with concrete and pushed it into all the corners and realized I forgot my hammer that I needed for vibrating. When it comes to vibrating, you can literally spend as much or as little time as you want here, but the more time you do spend, the less voids you're going to have. I only spent about 2 to 3 minutes actually vibrating my mold before I started adding my reinforcement. Now I'm just using leftover pieces of reinforcement here. Again, I had from other projects, and that's perfectly fine. But the reinforcement that you add, you're going to want to keep it about 1 inch away from all of the walls, just to make sure you don't have any funny ghosting issues. Once the reinforcement's added though, you can go ahead and finish topping up the mold with your concrete. Again, push it out with your hands, flatten it out, adding more as necessary. And you can screed the mold after you want as well, but these are such small slabs, it's not really necessary. But once you have everything flattened right out, then again, you can go ahead and do your final round of vibrating. Now this round I spent about 5 or 6, 7 minutes on, and that was about it. I knew I was going to have some voids, but I wasn't really worried about it. But once you have them done, go ahead and cover them with a tarp or some plastic for 48 hours. A couple days later, we can remove the tarp and start demolding these guys to see what we got. Now, if you applied a good healthy amount of car wax to that mold earlier on, the sides and the top will pop off completely effortlessly. They just slide right off with no fight. Before we go ahead and flip our slabs over, I'm just going to soften all the bottom edges because they're pretty sharp right now. I'm just using a 220 grit sanding sponge, and I'm sanding from the corner towards the center of the slab, and that's just so I don't risk blowing out the corners if I sand too aggressively. Now I'm just going to give it a quick hydration just with a little squirt bottle and some water before I flip the slab over. And again, it's just to control the curing process and to prevent curling over time. Now before I do any sanding or anything like that to the top and sides of the slab, I'm going to let it finish curing for another 24 hours. But I want air to flow all the way around it, so I'm going to rest it on the side walls. And this will just let it come up to a little bit more hardness before we finish attacking with sandpaper. With our slabs finishing curing, we can go ahead and build our wood frames. Now these are super simple frames. They're made out of 2x2 pine and they're held together with pocket hole screws. Now I cut 4 legs at 19.5 inches, 3 stretchers at 15.5 inches, and 2 more small stretchers at 7 inches each. I would suggest drilling 2 pocket holes in all of these. I only ended up actually drilling 1 in all of my stretchers, and it kind of makes it easy for the stretchers to want to roll over. 2 would just be a little bit more sturdier. Now we can build our first assembly, and you'll notice that my stretcher, when I'm attaching it to my legs here, I'm actually making sure that my pocket holes are facing up, and that's just so they're going to be hidden underneath the concrete top once the table's assembled. For my lower stretcher, I measured up from the bottom of my legs 2 inches on each side, and I'm going to place my lower stretcher above that 2-inch mark, but in this case, I'm making sure my pocket holes are going to be facing down, again, so they're hidden. And now we can move on to our second assembly, and in this case I'm going to leave 4 inches from the bottom of my legs, and that will just leave me a 1/2 inch gap between my 2 lower stretchers once the table is fully assembled. Now once our 2 short pieces are attached to our frame, you'll notice that that leaves us an 1.5 inch gap, which is perfect because that's going to intersect once we put the table together with our top stretcher, giving us basically an X or a cross, however you want to look at it. Now I'm just going to mark the center of my long stretcher and the center of my 2 small boards and make sure that all of my marks line up perfectly with each other, and that way I know everything is literally centered with each other. I'm going to clamp the whole assembly together because it's going to want to push around and move around on you when you try and fasten these last 2 screws in. I found that out the hard way on the first table, so definitely if you have some clamps, you're going to want to use them here. When it comes to finishing the tables, you can do whatever you please. You could paint it, stain it, just clear coat it. It's entirely up to you. I used a linen white stain from Rust-Oleum Ultimate here because, again, like I said, I'm matching the bench that I refinished last year, so this matches perfectly for me. But while the stain's drying, I'm going to go back outside and I'm going to finish the concrete tops now because they've had more time to dry, and I've just got some 800 grit sandpaper wrapped around the sanding sponge that I used earlier, and I'm going to wet sand the top. Now, a few passes in both directions is honestly all you need. Make sure you do the corners, the edges, as well as the sides. And that's really all you need. It's not aggressive enough you're going to expose rocks, but it's going to smooth and flatten out the top quite a bit. Make sure, however, you remove all of that sanding dust once you're finished with some water and a shop rag, because now we're going to move on to actually sealing the slabs. Now, I'm going to flip it over and seal the bottom side first with 1 full strength coat of a acrylic water-based concrete countertop sealer. Once that's had a couple minutes to dry, I'll flip it over and I'm going to start sealing the top. Now for the first coat, I like to just dampen the slab again and apply another coat of the sealer with some water. Now that just kind of helps it soak in slowly. But for the second and third coats, I apply them full strength with no water. Just pour it straight on the microfiber towel and wipe it into the slab. Now the sealer dries pretty quickly. It's about a ½ hour between coat if I had to guess, something like that. Once it no longer feels tacky on the slab, you can go ahead and apply your next coat. But before we apply our wax, we're definitely going to want to let it cure for a couple hours. Now this again is a specifically made concrete countertop wax. This stuff is really simple to apply, microfiber towel or a shop rag, and you just buff it on in small circles, let it dry for about a ½ hour, and then wipe it off. You're going to want to apply these as needed, but for the sealer, it should be about once a year, and for the wax, probably every couple of months or something like that, and that's it. Now for the bottom of my legs, I didn't want the wood sitting directly on the ground all the time. If it's humid out or it rains or something like that, the water is obviously going to accelerate rot on the bottom of the legs, and I didn't want that. So I got these little rubber silicone bumpers. That's just going to pick the feet up off the ground, so I'm not going to have that direct to ground contact. Then after everything was all done, I gave them a couple of coats of a matte finish lacquer-based clear coat from Rust-Oleum. With everything finally cured, we can finally attach the 2 halves together with some silicone dollops on our frame. Now again, you can use these tables inside, outside, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you attempt this, build them, have fun, and enjoy the process, learn something new. So I hope you guys liked the video. If you do, build anything like this, let me know. Hit me up on Instagram, shoot me an email with pictures, message me down in the comments below. I answer everybody. So again, I hope you guys like this one. Let me know your thoughts. I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.